All right, there we go. So here we are, episode number 20 of the Nutrient Health Project podcast. Whoop, whoop. So we were just both talking about how we were a little low energy today, but we're still going to bring the energy for you. It's been storming all day off and on. It's Sunday when we record these usually, so it's kind of a overcast, drizzly, rainy day, and we're both just kind of like, ready to kick back and relax. But we want to record this episode and kick it out to you. We are going to be talking about stress today because I want to set the groundwork with this episode for next week's episode, number 21, obviously, 2021. If you pass mathematics, give me a woohoo. But I want to lay the groundwork for number 21, where we're going to be talking kind of about how we mitigate our stress. But that does not mean today is not an extremely important and I think eye-opening podcast for some people out there, because it's kind of cool. Well, it's not cool, but it's neat to understand how stress affects the body. So, I mean, it's not cool what it does, but it's cool to understand how it works. So, with all that introductory jibber-jabber out of the way,
if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.
And while you're there subscribing, if you would leave us a 5-star rating and review, we would greatly appreciate it. You could do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcast, anybody podcast, I think Google Podcasts, whatever. But those 5-star ratings, and if you want to drop a sentence or two, a review on the podcast, we would really appreciate that. That just lets us know that you are picking up what we're putting down. So also, in past episodes, we've had a different email to send questions to, and that still works, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue. So as of today and going forward, we now, if you have questions for the podcast and you want to send them, either if you have feedback on what we're putting out or if you want questions answered on future episodes, send them to NutrientPodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word, NutrientPodcast@gmail.com. It's a lot easier to remember. So, all right, with that.
So, today, episode 20 is a landmark for us.
Yes, it is. So there is actually a tweet. I've heard this quote a couple different times. And I had to kind of track it down. It's actually, I couldn't figure out who to attribute it to. I saw Jack Butcher was one person, somebody else came up. But basically, there was a tweet or a couple of tweets from 2021. So last year, we're recording this on, August 7th today? Yes. August 7th, 2021. 2022. Jesus. Fail. I was too worried about saying I don't pay attention to the days or the weather, but yeah, it is 2022. I'm at least aware of that much. Good Lord, did I mention sleep and rain?
Yeah.
But so there was a tweet from last year, which was 2021, that said, thank you for saving me on that one. The tweet said, 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. So as of the tweet when it came out, as of that time, that means 1.8 million podcasts quit before episode 3 or by episode 3. So 90% of podcasts that start don't get past episode 3. So of those 1.8 million, the 10% that are remaining, 200,000 again at the time of the tweet, 200,000 that make it past episode 3, 90% of those don't make it past 20 episodes. So this is kind of like a landmark that basically means that we are in the top 10% of the top 10% of podcasts that have ever started. So we are in the 1%, again, if my mathematics are correct, we are in the 1% of podcasts that have ever started. And I'm sure those statistics have changed a little bit because it feels like everybody has a podcast. But it's just kind of cool to realize that, if you just keep going, and I know we kind of stopped for 8 months there trying to look at different options and everything. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is it's a small landmark for us. It's kind of cool to see, where we are at 20 episodes in, and I'm excited to see where we're going to be at 200 episodes in. Yeah. But more than anything, it's I think there's a lesson, not just in just keep going, but I think the lesson is more to keep going, but to keep working on improving and keep refining what you're doing. So if she and I are we'll still be us to a certain degree, right? But hopefully it's a lot more professional
New and improved.
New and improved in about 180. Well, before 180%. You get that? Yeah. I'm just going to shut up. We're just going to get into this episode. All right. So
So today's episode, like Andy already mentioned, is going to be a quick one on how stress affects your health and fitness goals. And next week's episode will be on how Andy and I help handle stress.
Yep, kind of what we do to mitigate it, like I mentioned. So in next week's episode, we are going to kind of cover our daily routine, how stress like shows up for us, and you'll understand, what I mean by that a little bit more in today's episode, but also the habits, the practices, the supplements, and the nutrition, and the beliefs even that we use to mitigate the S word. So, and the S word is stress, not shit. I guess you could say like the shitty S word. So the S word.
Yeah.
But for now, let's actually get into the show. So episode number 20, stress and its effects on you.
So I think we need a little primer first.
Agreed.
So, what's the surface level science you could share?
So, great way of putting it. So the surface level science, because the whole goal of the podcast, the reason I started this and the reason I dragged her on board on episode, 10 or 11 or something is when you came on, I think.
Yeah.
The whole goal of this was nothing too complex. Like what I like doing in nutrient health and fitness, what we like doing as trainers, is helping break down more complex things and make it simple for everybody. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yes, digestible, pun intended, right? We're trying to clear your plate, Make little pun there, make it a little more digestible, right?
Go.
So you can process it. Mm-hmm. Going into the bowel movements now. Again, this is going off the rails quickly. But yeah, I want to keep things simple today. So basically, that was like one of the goals of the podcast from the very beginning, as I get an eyelash in my eyeball, was to make the complex very simple. So we do need to lay some groundwork for today, though. So I'm going to keep this, again, surface level, like Holly said, surface level science. But it's important to talk about three and a half, how you want to look at this, acronyms and what they mean. So I'm going to make this super simple. We've got a metaphor coming up. It's actually a good metaphor because sometimes my metaphors are like, what the hell are you talking about? But so the three acronyms, three and a half, that I want to talk about, we have, and you may have heard of some of these, maybe not. If you haven't, then you're in for a treat. If you have heard of them, then I will make these a little simpler to understand. So we're going to just briefly, again, talk about your HPA axis, your HPT axis, and your HPG or HPO axis, depending on if you're a man or a woman. So very, very simply, if you noticed on all three or four of those, you have the first two letters are the same, H and P, right? So the H, and again, I'm going to keep this super surface level. I'm not getting any of the hormones or any of the science behind, very surface level science, nothing super deep here. So now that we got that well established, H is standing for your hypothalamus, okay, part of the brain. P standing for pituitary, also part of the brain. You may have heard of either or both of those, hypothalamus and pituitary. So, like I said, HPA axis, HPT axis, and then HPG or HPO axis. So the HPA axis is your hypothalamus, pituitary, and A stands for adrenals. HPT is your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your thyroid. And then the HPG or HPO, I'm wondering if anybody has any guesses out there since I kind of gave the hint of men and women, but it's your hypothalamus, pituitary, gonadal if you're a man, or ovarian if you are a woman, right? So HP is the main things that we're going to come back to. So the important thing in this kind of initial setup is your hypothalamus is it's going to send what are called releasing hormones to the pituitary. The pituitary, when it gets those releasing hormone signals from your hypothalamus, the pituitary turns around and sends out stimulating hormones, commands to the specific glands or organs. Like I mentioned, your adrenals, your thyroid, your gonads or ovaries. So one of the examples you can think of with this, just to give people something that most people over the age of 30 or 35 have probably heard of, TSH, which it stands for, it's your thyroid panel. It's on your thyroid panel. TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So with what I just said, the stimulating hormones come from the pituitary. Prior to that, your hypothalamus will release something called thyroid releasing hormone. So the chain of events is basically your hypothalamus will release thyroid releasing hormone, which then hits the pituitary. The pituitary then releases thyroid stimulating hormone, which then essentially goes to your thyroid and kind of knocks on the door, and it's like, yo, time to go to work. So I think a good analogy with this would be that if you think of a job or a factory, the hypothalamus is like the boss, like the owner of the factory. And the hypothalamus, or the boss, is going to tell the pituitary, who is, in this beautiful little analogy, the manager. So the hypothalamus is the boss that's going to tell the pituitary, or the manager, to get the employees, or your organs and glands, clocked in and started on their job.
So how does stress enter into this analogy?
So, wonderful question. Wonderfully placed question there. So, so it is a perfect segue into another analogy. So stress in your body, and we'll talk about all of the different ways that stress can show up and manifest in your life and in everybody's life. But stress is like, oh shit, there's a fire in the factory, right? So basically, if you think about, like, picture an Amazon distribution warehouse, right? I'm not wishing any fires on anybody working there, but like, if there's a fire in the factory, then the boss, assuming he's at the factory, assuming your hypothalamus hasn't left the building, but assuming that the boss is in the factory, it's going to then tell that manager, like, hey, get the emergency team in there, which in the case of stress is your adrenals, right? And I'm going to put a big bow on all of us here in a second. But so basically there's a fire in the factory, you're stressed out, okay? The boss, the hypothalamus, is going to tell the manager, the pituitary glands, to send out a signal to get the emergency, like firemen in this case, the adrenals, in there, and to get all the other employees, your thyroid, your sex hormones, everything else, to get them, like, to stop working and get them out of the factory. Because if there's a fire raging, like, production in that factory is going to stop, right? You might have some brave, little hormones or brave little workers in this analogy, like, still trying to function during a fire, but it's eventually, unless that fire is mitigated, then it's just going to kind of get worse, and it will consume those poor little employers, employees. Good Lord. So, basically, sorry, I'm trying to lose or get track of my notes here. So if stress is not stopped, that fire is going to keep raging, right? And that's where a lot of people have to kind of deal with stress that's just going nonstop. They start to, what's the word I'm looking for? Medicate or handle it in ways that basically aren't super productive. And that's not to say that, like, you can't have any stress. That doesn't mean that, like, if you have a little bit of stress, the whole factory is on fire. I'm talking more like, if you're in a factory and there's a fire in the trash can, nobody's going to go, well, unless you're like some kind of crazy factory, but like nobody's going to go running out the door if there's a small fire in a trash can. You take care of it. But again, in this stress analogy, if that fire in the trash can is now all of a sudden spreading to, like
everything,
pallets loaded with fireworks, then that's a problem. But again, it's not to say that, like, any little bit of stress is going to be a problem. It's more like amount and how the person handles it. Good Lord. But so, like, everyone is going to handle their stress differently, right? So, like, I know, I think between the two of us,
you handle it better.
I'm a little more resilient.
He's more stoic,
but,
for sure.
Well, and that's part of, like, who you are, is you're a very, caring and understanding person, and so you're very, empathetic? Is that, you're an empath? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah. Sensitive.
Yeah, you're sensitive. So, but like most things, this whole stress thing is going to kind of exist on a spectrum, right? So, like, a little bit of stress can actually be a good thing, right? If you are working out and you're training, that stress is actually going to be a good thing because it's going to make you stronger. It's going to improve your cardiovascular shape, whatever type of training you're doing, right? It's kind of like if you do a little bit of fasting here and there, then that's going to help you, most likely. But there are, like, people who, like, work out 7 days a week and they do too much and they're overtraining. Now that stress is chronic, and now we're on the other end of the spectrum. Or if we look at, like, calories. So someone's eating too much consistently. That's a type of stress that's going to lead to insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes eventually, and a whole host of other issues, right? If someone's not eating enough, then they're going to also have their own side of things, right? I mean, this is something that she and I kind of dance around, somewhat frequently, because we want to stay leaner, but we also have a super active lifestyle. We're always training all the time, so and it can be hard for us to kind of find that balance. So, but I think we're getting pretty good at finding the triggers. Like when we're getting overtrained, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, we need to bump up some calories, and again, we'll talk more about that next week. So, but the bottom line with all of this is stress can be a disastrous situation for your life. Again, keeping it surface level, just think of like how much stress you have going on in your factory, i.e. your body, and how is your body responding to it? How are you responding to it? So, and how are you perceiving it? So again, another way to look at this with the fire is if the whole factory is on fire for an hour or two, then the adrenals will come in, they'll put the fire out, and everything after an hour or two, like people can start coming back into the factory and work is going to kind of resume without much of a problem. But if the fire has been going on for weeks or months at a time and the factory is just completely decimated and it's like burned down to the foundations and they have to rebuild the whole factory from the ground up, it's going to be like weeks or months to repair things before like production can get back to normal working conditions, right? So, sticking with that analogy, sticking with that metaphor, it's like if you're only a week or two into some kind of stressful situation, that doesn't mean it's going to wreck you for weeks and months. But what we see really commonly is people who are like dealing with different types of stress that we'll get into here in a second. We see people who are dealing with different types of stress for weeks, months, and more commonly years.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really insidious, because if you're dealing with these different types of stressors, you're used to just working out hard 7 days a week, and you're used to like not eating too much, or you're used to kind of bouncing around to different diets, or you're used to trying to like fast 18 hours a day and do really hard workouts and get 6 hours of sleep, and you've been doing that for years. It can be hard because then mindset plays into it, because it's like, well, that's all I know and that's what I do is I do all of these things, and it's hard to kind of back out of it. And sometimes you almost have to take like 2 steps backwards to take 5 steps forward, and it can be hard for people to take those 2 steps backwards. So again, it's all a very simplistic way. Like, I'm not getting into any of the deeper hormones outside of the thyroid example that I used. But if you have any questions on any of that, or if you would like us to go into more detail in the future, just let us know. Again, NutrientPodcast@gmail.com. So with that, Holly dear, when you think of stress, what do you think of?
Probably mainly like work stress. Just feel like super busy, a lot going on, don't have enough time to get it done.
Right.
Just kind of like overwhelmed, I guess. I think of it more probably in the work sense.
Yeah.
So
I would agree too. I mean, just from like my outside looking in on you, I mean, that definitely seems to be the main thing that stresses you out.
Right.
So
how about you?
Thank you for asking. So for me, I guess I would say it's work based, even though like my work is training, because it for me, like, just to be completely candid, the things that stress me out are like because you've always got 18 things to do at your job, but I mean, I've always got like 18 things to do here,
right?
Not on top of like dishes and cooking and food prep and da. What clients are coming in to train for the day? What client phone calls do I have to do for the day?
You're studying for your course.
Doing the courses, the ongoing education that I'm constantly doing. What homework do I have to do with that? What forms am I putting together? So I mean, it's just, you get the idea. Like, there's always a ton of stuff, and I think my biggest stressor with that is just identifying what do I need to do for the day, and avoiding distraction like every other human being. Like, I'm best, like, I just keep my phone away from me, and again, we'll talk about that stuff more next week, but I would say that's my biggest stressor too. I think we're both excuse me, I think we're both blessed in the fact that like our relationship is not a stressor,
Right.
for the most part. I know if I start getting like that chin from you, like she has this thing. I don't know if you're just listening to it, it's not gonna do you any good. But if you're watching this, she does that with her chin. Like she'll basically, if you're just listening to it, it's like she like lifts her chin, like like if you imagine someone saying like okay, like but she'll just hold that pose, and I know I'm in trouble. So, but I mean, outside of that, and then I think me really just kind of like poking the bear, and being a little too
joshing me,
just busting your balls. That's really the only stress we have. So I do think it's a work thing, but I would rather take my work stress now than the work stress I had, flipping burgers or stocking shelves or 20 years of like drugs and alcohol issues. So I think that's another indicator of improving in life, is that your problems are getting bigger and scarier. And that just means that you're improving as a human being in your ability to handle bigger and better problems. Because that was something that, we got together in kind of like the last couple years of me going through those things for like 20 years, and I told you, I was like, I knew it was coming. I was like, one day we're gonna have bigger, better problems. And I knew, like, at the time we were kind of struggling with doing the same stuff over and over and over, and it's just like feeling like you're on a hamster wheel, or like you're going crazy. But you stick with it, and you just know that like brighter days are coming, even if those brighter days are bigger problems, because you're then becoming a better, like, I want to be the kind of person who has like $10 million problems to worry about. I want to be the person who, payment processor, I use this example all the time. I was like, what if we launch a course and the payment processor shuts down, and like, we lose $500,000. I mean, just, it's bigger and better problems. Right. I think that's a sign of progress. So
definitely.
So other examples, though, kind of more common. So the work one is really common. I think a lot of people, when they think of stress, they think of work, because for most people, work is stress. Even if you're working a job like Holly is, most people will have that kind of a stress. Not many people have a job that they like. At least that's been my experience. But if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner like myself, and like I'm, like she is essentially, co-owner of this, it's still stressful, but it's stressful on your own terms. So, and I know there are a couple people listening to this that own their own businesses, and I know you can relate that it's a much better stress because it's your stress. It's not somebody else's stress. And when somebody else's stress becomes your stress, it's like, this ain't even my stress. Why am I dealing with this crap? So, but I think most people think of work when it comes to stress, regardless of whether it's theirs or someone else's. Some other examples of stress that I think are not as commonly considered would be sleep stress. And again, all of these exist on a spectrum. So sleep stress, if you don't get enough sleep, that's the most common one, right? Everybody, if you're not getting enough stress, that's going to impact you, right? That's going to negatively impact you. And kind of going back to the HPA and then the HPT and HPG and HPO, HPO, it's not like I said HBO. We're not talking about Cinemax here. But when stress comes in and you get stress, that HPA activity goes up. Like I said, the adrenals, those firefighters come in. So your HPA activity goes up. The other ones go down. I think I kind of glossed over that in my analogy of the fire. But like, so HPA, your adrenals start getting worked more because they're going to produce things like cortisol and, catecholamines. Again, I'm going to keep that kind of quick and easy. But your others, your hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, and your HPG and HPO, those get down regulated. So your adrenals are cranking out, and your thyroid and your sex hormones are cranking down. So that's like kind of the summary of this whole episode, is that's what happens to the body. And then like little bits and pieces, little bouts, we're okay doing that. But when it's chronic, that's where it becomes a problem. One bad night of sleep isn't going to wreck you. 4 or 5 nights, it's going to hit you a lot harder. And then like months or years of sleep deprivation, like, there are studies that link that to like, I think dementia and Alzheimer's. And I've sure as hell, like months at a time when I've been sleep deprived, like my memory is absolute crap. So, and I know that it takes years off of your life too. So getting too little sleep. On the other hand, the other side of the spectrum, too much sleep, right? If you're, you're laying in bed, if you wake up after 7 or 8 hours and you're laying in bed for another 3 or 4 hours, that's essentially depression, right? So like, it's okay to get out of the bed and go do some stuff. So sleep stress, another stress that I think people don't really think about, we know it, but caloric stress. So if most people on this, I think, are familiar, and we talked briefly about this, most people most people think of hypercaloric, so they're eating too much, and the detriments that come with that, right? So your metabolic syndrome, the type 2 diabetes and all that. But just like I said, the lower calorie side of things, I think we're going to hear more and more about that going into the future, because it's definitely something that in the fitness industry, there's kind of pressure to maintain this healthy, functional, ripped physique. And it's hard to do that if you're overeating. It's sometimes easier to do that if you're undereating. But the problem is if you undereat chronically, then again, HPA goes up. Yep, HPA goes up, HPT, HPGO go down, right? So caloric stress, high or low.
And there's also exercise and training stress. So if you're overdoing it, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of people we've dealt with, overtrain.
Yep.
Where they're,
overtrain, undereat.
Yeah, and they're, walking 20,000 steps and going for runs after a workout. After an hour or so of lifting, and it's just they can't understand why nothing's moving or why they feel tired all the time.
Yep.
And just overdoing it. So.
Yep. Well, and you got to have an exit plan when it comes to any of this stuff, right? Again, I think someone should be able to function on one bad night of sleep, right? It's going to be rough, but it shouldn't just wreck you for weeks at a time if you get one bad night of sleep, or even just wreck you for the day if you get one bad night of sleep. And there are ways, like if you're not in a major calorie deficit, if you're not doing a ton of activity, it's okay to get into a calorie deficit. It's okay to crank up that activity. But again, hopefully with this episode now you understand that what's going on in your body, it's a temporary solution, right? You're basically setting a fire to your factory, and maybe you need to get rid of some extra product in the factory, right? i.e. lose some weight. Maybe that's what you're trying to do, but if that fire keeps going, you're going to lose a whole lot more than just fat. So you have to have an exit strategy with the overtraining, with the undercaloric intake. So.
And then in addition with that, the under-recovering stress.
Yep.
So if you're doing all this work and you're not eating enough, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not stretching, which someone likes to point out that I don't always do, but I know I need to, and I know I need to get better at it because I know my body needs it. So I know this.
When she says don't always do,
we notice.
She does once a week.
I do not.
She does it once a week.
At least twice a week.
And it'll be like she's on the bench,
Oh
leaned forward on her cell phone, texting somebody. And I'm like, "Are you stretching?" Like, "Yep." That is not stretching. So
if I feel a stretch, it is stretching.
Anywho,
what's the next on the list, buddy?
I just want to stick on the stretching point. I just want to put you on blast on stretching.
You already did.
So, but yeah, under recovery, if you're not getting adequate recovery, and that's so I get some people that ask me, should I lift or should I do cardio? I think, as far as changing your body, it depends on what your goals are, right? That's one thing, too. A lot of people will get, when they ask me a question, I'm probably going to ask more questions because context is king in all of this. But if you reach out and say, should I lift or should I lose weight? Should I lift or should I do cardio to lose weight? I would say lift more. There is the consideration of doing cardio to kind of improve your base cardiovascular level. But if you have 5 days to work out a week, I would do 3 or 4 of those lifting and 1 or 2 of them as cardio, and using that cardio time to recover. So instead of, going for a run as fast as you can, like you're running away from a bear, put the intensity in the weightlifting, because that's going to provide a whole host of other stimuli and benefits to your body. And then when you're doing the cardio, get something like going on a stair mill at a pace that you can keep up, right? For, whatever it is at initially, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but trying to get to where you can do it for 30, 45, 60 minutes at just a slow pace. Going for a walk or a jog or something like that. That's something, walking, I think we've talked about it in past episodes. I know we've talked about walking, but I think we've talked about walking being one of the few physical activities that you can actually do to recover. So there are definitely, probably once a week where me and you are just like destroyed physically from the workouts. And it's like, we're just going to walk. Yesterday was one of those where it's like, I think we just walked like 11,000 steps. And like, that's, for us, it's not a lot. Yeah. But like, that was kind of all we needed for the day. And I was good with that. So that's our yawn. I need to recover. Other types of stress that come to mind would be familial stress. So is this, your spouse or your significant other is stressing you out, or maybe your parents or children are stressing you out, or your parent-in-laws or children-in-laws are stressing you out, right? Who knows what the situation is, but just like family relationships are stressing you out. I see you smiling. Like Holly said, work stress. So, and again, I mean, we've covered that one kind of abundantly, and I think that's, again, pretty much what most people think of when it comes to stress. Social media stress. That's something to think about. Not like just from getting online and getting hurt by someone's comments or what someone says about you, but like getting into fights with people, arguing. Maybe you're the person that's like posting mean things to other people. I don't think anybody listening to this is doing that. Hopefully not. If you are, shame on you. If you are doing that, let me know who you are. I know one person who probably is right now, but no, I don't think you'll do that. But like not just arguing and not just, getting mean things and mean things said to you, but how much time are you spending in front of your phone, right? How much time are you spent like with your neck craned over looking down at your phone? Are you on the phone? Some of these tie in together. Are you on the phone leading up to going to bed? It's going to negatively impact your sleep, right? You might not feel it, but if you go to bed without your phone for a few weeks and then try to be on your phone one night before you go to bed, you'll wake up, you should be a little groggier that next morning. So it does impact you.
And during the day, like you'll get on there and it'll just drain you.
Yep. So. I like the mornings, like if we have like a Saturday or a Sunday morning and we don't have to do anything immediately, I definitely notice if I'm like, I'm going to go, kind of sit down and just hop on my phone and check Instagram and Facebook and Reddit and see what else is going on. Before I know it, an hour's gone by and like I have no motivation to do anything.
Feel like blah.
Yeah, all my dopamine is just like completely gone. So I definitely, social media, I hate saying it's like a necessary evil right now, but with like what we're doing, it is one way to kind of get the word out. But yeah, I mean, it's such like that stuff is hardwired, literally programmed to draw you in and to keep you on the platform and to show you like engaging content, and engaging content usually isn't content that helps you be a better person. So there's definitely stress with social media. Perception stress. So what I mean by this is like how you view different things in your life. So perception stress meaning maybe your job isn't really that stressful to other people there, but you just hate it and you're just checked out and you're just like, screw this job. And every day when you wake up, you have to go and do this job. And like, before you even get out of bed, it's like, oh, here we go again. And just like you hate it, right? Or maybe your sleep, you're getting 7 hours when you'd really like to get 8 or 9. And you view that as like, just like, oh my God, like my sleep is just destroying me. And it's like, it's not really that bad. I mean, it could be better, but because you're perceiving it as a stressor, it's going to wreck you a little bit more. So I think perception stress, just the way you view your life and the way you're moving through it. Again, mindset, right? It goes back to that whole placebo thing of if they could bottle the placebo as a pill, it'd be like the most successful pill ever made. So mindset is everything, and your perception of your reality, I think, is everything. So.
And then perception of stress. So like meaning like if you think you're all stressed out and you've got so much stress going on, it stresses you out even more.
Yep. So okay. Like, yeah. And if you're like, kind of building off of the like perception stress. So I feel like those two, like perception stress and perception of stress, the way I'm looking at that is like perception stress is basically how is your mindset and filter and perspective of the world, how does that negatively impact you? And then perception of stress is I guess kind of more what I was saying on the first one is like, do you feel like you're stressed out? And then are you stressed out because you feel like you're stressed out, right? It can kind of pile up. So you're, again, two different ways of perception. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of breaking that down. Essentially, I would say perception stress is like mindset, your view of the world, unrelated to the stress that you're dealing with. So do you feel like, in the past, like with me, it's like 10 years ago, but, just, God, why can't people be healthier? I just wish people were healthier. And if they were all healthier, then this world would be a better place. And we'd stop wasting so much money on healthcare and da-da-da-da-da. And like, I found peace by just saying like, people are going to do what they're going to do. Like the ones that want help, I can help them. And the ones that don't, I can't do anything about it. That's like perception stress. I was stressing myself out unnecessarily because I have no control over what other people are going to do. And then perception of stress is like kind of what we're talking about with, oh my God, I didn't sleep that good. That's a stressor. Oh no, I'm stressed because I'm stressed. Like that's perception of stress. So
I've done that before.
Yeah. So I think we all do. I mean, that's because it's super easy to get in your head about it. And just, especially if you're like an overthinker or an overanalyzer, like both of us are, it's so easy to just get caught up and get on that hamster wheel and just go like around and around and around and around, like tearing something over and over and over in your head. So with all of those just kind of examples, like I'd like to ask, how do you handle your stressor? Or how do you handle your stressor? I've said stressor so many times. How do you handle your stress? The way you handle your stress can, again, be a stressor, right? So what I mean by that is, do you come home from a long day at work and crack open a beer without even thinking of it? Or do you just automatically reach for, a vodka? Or do you, maybe you're more into the devil's cabbage and you just come home and you smoke a joint or eat an edible or whatever it might be, right? Or do you come home stressed from work and like yell at your spouse or God forbid, go chasing after your kids or something? I don't know. I mean, people do some crazy shit because they're stressed out and they don't stop for 2 seconds to just be like, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm stressed, I need to calm down. So yeah, even how you handle your stress can be an additional stressor. So even, again, like, okay, maybe it's not alcohol or drugs, is it food? I think a lot of people will medicate with either alcohol, drugs, or food, or television, right? There's all of these things. And I'm not saying like don't sit down and relax and watch something. I mean, that's, we will go, probably 1 or 2 days a week and just watch something. Or we went and saw a movie yesterday, went and saw Bullet Train. Like, it's okay to do that. But if it's like 7 days a week and you're getting to bed late and you don't sleep that good because you stayed up drinking a beer and watching TV and all that, it's just, you got to pick and choose how you handle things. So as we get ready for next week's episode, I would ask, what stressors did we miss? Is there anything that you're thinking like, well, what about this stress? They didn't even bring that up. I'm sure there's dozens of forms of stress. So I'd be curious to see what you say as far as what stressors did we miss. What are you experiencing from those stressors? So how do you feel? Is it, some stressor that we completely missed, or maybe work is just destroying you? Like, let us know. Reach out to us. Find us, again, NutrientPodcast at Gmail, or find us on Facebook and Instagram at Nutrient_official. Do you think any of the ones we've listed are affecting you directly? So again, is sleep your biggest detriment? Is work really killing you? And then how do you handle them? Are you the person coming home and cracking open a beer and watching TV? Are you the person that's over-exercising? Are you the person that's, medicating with food? Are you the person that's doing all of them? So, again, no judgment whatsoever. For 20 years of my life, it was basically over-exercising, drugs and alcohol, and then, like, under-eating. I mean, under-eating and overeating, depending on what stage I was at. So, regardless of where you are, there's hope no matter what. But you just, the first step in solving a problem is realizing it's a problem. So, and stress is a problem. So next episode, we will be telling you more about how we handle our problems. It'll be episode number 21. We will be there to claim our spots in the top 1% of all podcasts that have ever started. Dun, 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 dun. And like I said, we will be kind of getting into the habits and practices and beliefs and supplements and nutrition and training, and Holly can tell us all about her stretching routine that she does every day.
Got it.
Wink. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. Monty Python reference for anybody out there. But I think with that, that's all we got for episode number 20. Trying to keep it a little on the shorter side today. We will see you guys next week for episode number 21.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Booyah, guys. Have a great week. We will see you on the next one. All right. Later.
Bye.